15 years ago, my boyfriend cheated on me with my closest friend, and she ended up pregnant. What hurt even more was that my family knew the whole time but chose to keep it from me. I left home and cut off all contact with them. Now, after all these years, my mother is asking me to forgive them and make peace. This story started nearly half my life ago, and I still can't talk about it without feeling that tight knot in my chest. I was 18 at the time, living with my parents and 4 siblings. I was in my senior year of high school, prepping for finals and planning to apply to college. I had a boyfriend, Trevor, 20 years old. We'd been together for 3 years. And I had a best friend, Cassie, my age. We'd known each other since diapers. Our families were close. Holidays, birthdays, camping trips. It was all done together. It felt like we grew up in one big village. Cassie had always been in my life. She slept at our house more than at her own. We passed notes, shared clothes, and joked that when one of us got married, the other would live next door. Back then, I truly believed my life was on the right path. Everything felt so clear. I'd go to college, marry Trevor. Cassie would be godmother to our kids, and we'd all grow old together, but never really grow apart. I still remember the night Cassie came over looking pale and shaken. She sat on my bed, stared at the floor, then finally whispered, "I'm pregnant." I knew she'd broken up with her last boyfriend a while ago. She hadn't mentioned seeing anyone new. When I asked who the father was, she said she didn't want to talk about it. Just vaguely mentioned it was an ex her face. It wasn't just fear. There was something else. Guilt, confusion, pain. I didn't push. I hugged her, said we'd figure it out together. From that night on, I was with her through everything. Doctor's appointments, ultrasounds, baby shopping trips, even birth classes. Her parents were shocked but supportive. Mine didn't know. Cassie begged me to keep it quiet. And I did. Somewhere along the way, I started to forget this wasn't my baby. We picked a name. She wanted a girl, Sarah. It felt like ours. I felt proud to be her person. I didn't know that everyone else already knew who the father was. Everyone but me. I didn't ask too many questions. I figured if she wasn't saying it was for a reason. Trevor didn't say much either. He'd nod when I talked about Cassie's progress, tell me I was amazing, then go back to his phone. He seemed distant, but I blamed school and stress. Then came the day at the mall. I ran into Cassie's ex. He looked stunned to see me and asked, "Cassie's really pregnant?" I nodded. "She's due soon." He laughed. "Seriously?" We broke up over a year ago. "Wait, you're not the father?" "God, no," he said. "Maybe ask someone closer to home, like Trevor." That line stuck with me like a splinter, but I brushed it off. Trevor? Really? They were friends, sure. The 3 of us were always together. But that? It didn't make sense. I chalked it up to jealousy or spite and didn't tell anyone. When I told Cassie I saw her ex, she froze. Her expression changed in a split second, and she quickly changed the subject. A few nights later, I was home with my younger sister. We were setting up to watch a movie when I casually mentioned the conversation. My sister suddenly went quiet, then got up and left the room. I followed her to the hallway and heard her talking to our mom in the kitchen. She was upset, saying she was tired of hiding the truth, that I deserved to know, that the father of Cassie's baby was Trevor. I froze, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Then I walked into the kitchen. Mom turned pale. My sister burst into tears. I said one thing. "Say that again." That's when the darkest chapter of my life began. I don't remember how that night ended. Everything in my head blurred. Who said what? How I reacted? I honestly don't know. The only thing I remember clearly is sitting on the hallway floor, hands wrapped around my head, trying not to pass out. My whole body was shaking. Mom tried saying something. Comforting me? Explaining? I couldn't hear her. My younger sister was crying like someone had died. In a way, someone had. The life I believed in just died. The next day, I didn't get out of bed. No food, no water. I ignored every call, every message. My phone didn't stop buzzing. Trevor, Cassie, my sister, even Trevor's mom. I stayed silent. I couldn't speak, couldn't think. I felt physically ill. My chest, my stomach, my throat, everything ached like my body was rejecting the truth. On the second day, I tried standing up. I made it to the kitchen, took a sip of water, and immediately threw up. That's how bad it was. I wasn't just in shock, I was broken. Everyone had betrayed me. My best friend, my boyfriend, my family. They all knew. Every single one of them. And they said nothing. I didn't know what hurt more, the cheating itself or the lying. For how long? When Cassie asked me to help choose a baby name, she already knew. When I held her hand during ultrasounds, she looked me in the eyes and still lied. When Trevor said he loved me, he already knew he was going to be a father to someone else's baby. I replayed everything, trying to find any red flags. There were none. I trusted them. I was blind. Later, my mom told me Cassie confessed to her parents early in her second month. They told my mom, then Trevor's parents, then my siblings. My older sister knew before me. Her boyfriend is Trevor's brother, and he knew too. Everyone did. A few days later, Trevor's mom came into my room. No knock. My mom let her in. I was lying in bed, staring at the wall, unwashed, still wearing the same clothes. I didn't care. She sat beside me, placed a hand on my shoulder, and said they were sorry. That they never wanted things to end like this. That Cassie was a good girl who just made a mistake. That it was a one-time thing and just happened. I didn't reply. I just turned my face further into the pillow. Then she said Cassie was due to give birth any day now, and it was hard on her. That she needed a friend, that I was important to her. I wanted to scream. 9 months I'd been that friend, that support, that constant. And now she expected me to be there during labor? For someone who had been sleeping with my boyfriend behind my back, lying to my face every day? She left. I stayed there, unmoving. I didn't even have tears left. Just static. A week later, Cassie gave birth. Mom came into my room and said the delivery had been rough. C-section, heavy blood loss. She said it like I was supposed to care, like I was supposed to feel something. I said nothing. I stared at the ceiling. That evening, my sister sent me a message, a photo, a newborn girl, caption, Sarah, the name Cassie and I had picked together. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just looked at the screen and felt nothing. Then came another message. The whole family, ours, Cassie's, and Trevor's, went out to celebrate at a bar, my parents included. I sat alone in the house. No family, no friends, no truth. For the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own home. That was the moment I knew I had to leave. I didn't leave right away. Even though everything inside me was screaming, go, my body wouldn't move. I sat on the edge of the bed holding a backpack, not packing it, just holding it. I'd get up, open the closet, pick up a shirt, then put it back. I didn't know what to take, or where I'd go, or what tomorrow would look like. Mom was in the kitchen. I could hear her on the phone. Her voice cheerful, excited, probably talking about the baby. Sarah, the same little girl I was supposed to hold. The one I'd picked a name for. The one I'd waited for with Cassie. I felt sick, but not like before. Not from shock. It was different now. A deeper kind of pain. The kind that comes from realizing you were erased. Quietly, without warning, without words. Everyone just moved on like I never existed. Dad came into my room that evening. He stood in the doorway for a while, then sat on the bed beside me. I didn't look up. He sighed and said, "This is hard. But family is still family. You'll have to find a way through." I stared at the floor. I didn't ask whose side he was on. It was already clear. Later, Mom brought me a plate of food. She said she knew I was hurting, that they didn't know how to tell me, that they hoped it would all blow over and we could go back to how things were. Back to how things were. I couldn't even imagine that anymore. When she left, I stood up, closed the door, pulled the backpack in front of me and started stuffing it with anything I could grab. Jeans, t-shirts, my charger, a toothbrush. I wasn't thinking. I just packed. I heard a door slam downstairs, someone laughing. Life was going on. But something in me was ending. I left that night. No goodbyes. I stepped outside, called a cab to the station, and got on the first train out of town. It happened to be Phoenix. I'd never been there, just picked it randomly from the board. I needed to be somewhere no one knew my name. The first few days were terrifying. I rented a bunk bed in a women's hostel. It smelled like mold, the showers barely worked, and someone cried at night in the next room. I barely slept. But more than anything, I felt relief. I wasn't near them anymore. I wasn't part of the performance, and that made it bearable. I found a job at a store. Retail, minimum wage, long shifts, aching feet. But for the first time in months, I felt real. I chose who to talk to. No one lied to my face. No one called me selfish. I didn't know how to do life, how to pay taxes, open a bank account, rent a place. Sometimes I wanted to go back, call my mom, apologize, though for what, and just beg, tell me everything's going to be okay. But I didn't call. I knew everything didn't include me anymore. I didn't meet Noah right away. It was a few weeks in. He worked in the warehouse where our store got shipments. He was 3 years older and had his own complicated family history. One day we were unloading boxes together and he asked, "You run away too?" I nodded. Didn't say anything else. And from that moment, we started talking. He didn't pry, didn't ask questions, just showed up, brought coffee when I looked like I was falling apart, helped me with documents, gave me the address of a free legal aid center. One day, he handed me a GED pamphlet and said, "Just take a look. Maybe it's worth it." I only held it together because of him. Some nights I cried into my pillow. Some mornings I couldn't force myself out of the hostel bed. But little by little, it got easier. I didn't know if I could ever trust people again. But in that strange city, sweaty after a shift, broke and alone, I felt like I was finally meeting myself. I don't remember the exact moment Noah and I became us. It just happened. At first, we drank coffee together after shifts. Then he offered me a place to sleep when I got sick. Then he started helping with forms I couldn't figure out, signed me up for free evening classes. A couple months later, we were living together. No labels, no declarations. We just gravitated closer until we were never apart. I was 19, working in retail, living in a one-bedroom apartment, studying for my GED and still waking up from dreams where Trevor was holding a baby and Cassie was standing next to him, smiling. I'd wake up crying, and Noah would just hold me. He never asked who they were. He knew not to. With him, I felt safe. Not judged, not compared, not blamed. He didn't try to fix me. He just stayed when I was broken. About a year after I moved out, Noah got news he'd inherited some money from his grandfather. Not a fortune, but enough to change things. He asked if I wanted to move to a bigger city. At first, I hesitated. No plan, no guarantees. But I said yes. Because for the first time, the idea of going somewhere with someone didn't scare me. We moved to Seattle, rented a tiny apartment, looked for work, hauled boxes, stretched every dollar. It was loud, messy, exhausting. But I finally felt like I was building something real. Something mine. That winter, right after my 21st birthday, we got married. No ring, no dress. We were walking down the street, freezing, holding hands, and Noah said, "Want to just do it?" I laughed. It made no sense. I was still healing. We were still figuring things out. But I said yes. We got married at City Hall, in coats, holding coffee cups. No family, no guests, no expectations. A month later, I enrolled in college. I chose a social work program. I wanted to help people who felt lost like I once did. We agreed Noah would cover most expenses while I studied, and I'd work part-time. By then, his online business was picking up steam. For the first time, thinking about the future didn't make me panic. We weren't perfect. We fought. We had hard months. There were days I felt like he deserved someone better. I wasn't in love with him at first. I loved him, yes. Trusted him. But in love? Number. But time passed. We survived bad launches, sleepless nights, quiet dinners. He was always steady. Always there. He held me when I fell. Not to drag me up, just to stay until I stood on my own. Eventually, we had our first son. Then another. I graduated. Started working for the company he'd built from nothing. We grew together, step by step. Sometimes I thought about Cassie, Trevor, my family. Not with pain, just with emptiness. Like a movie I'd seen years ago. I didn't know what had happened to them. And I didn't want to. Until one day, I opened the mailbox and saw a letter. The handwriting was messy. Young. It said, "Hi, my name is Amber. I'm 14. I'm your niece. I'd really like to meet you." I read the letter 3 times, first with tension, then numbness, then tears. I didn't know what to write back. But I knew one thing. The past doesn't always die. Sometimes it shows up as a letter written in a child's hand. I didn't reply to the letter right away. I read it dozens of times, tucked it back in the drawer, pulled it out again. Her name was Amber, my older sister's daughter, the same sister who once dated Trevor's brother. That made Amber my niece, 14 years old, which meant she was born after I left. The letter was simple, sweet. No sign she knew anything. She just wrote that she'd heard about me from her mom, that she got curious, that she'd really like to get to know me. I showed it to Noah. He read it quietly, handed it back, and said, "Do what feels right. I'm with you." I wrote a response, a short, careful letter. I told her I appreciated her message, that I now lived in another state, that I had a family, that I hadn't spoken to my relatives in a long time, but I'd be happy to chat. And we started exchanging letters. It was easy, safe. She wrote about school, her friends, her cat. I told her about my boys, my job. I avoided the past, not out of fear, but because I didn't want to drag an innocent kid into something heavy. She mentioned once that she'd only ever heard bits and pieces about me, that I left a long time ago and no one really knows where you went. Months passed. Sometimes we wrote weekly, sometimes less often. It was strange but warm. I could feel something slowly growing inside me again. Not pain, not forgiveness, just warmth. Quiet and unconditional. Eventually, I learned I had 9 nieces and nephews, that my younger sister was a mother now too, that Trevor and Cassie's parents still spent time with my parents, that Cassie and Trevor got married 4 years after I left, that they had 3 kids. It didn't hurt. I felt something closer to curiosity, maybe even regret, but not about them, about myself, like I'd carried the weight of someone else's guilt for too long. And now, I was finally able to look at it all like a grown woman. One day, Amber mentioned that my parents were going through a hard time. Dad lost his job. One of my brothers, too. The house was at risk. She didn't ask for anything, I knew that. But I still felt uneasy. I talked to Noah. He listened and said, "We can afford to help, but it's your decision." So we sent money. No names, no return address. Just help. A couple weeks later, I got another letter from Amber, this time with a photo. My parents sitting on a porch. Smiling, but something about my mom's eyes looked different. Tired, like she hadn't slept in weeks. And I knew I was ready to visit. Not to forgive, not to come back, just to see. I wrote Amber that I was planning to fly in. She was thrilled. Said she'd tell her mom, but no one else. We bought tickets. I was nervous, but calm. As the plane began to descend, I saw the city I hadn't been to in 15 years. It looked smaller than I remembered. Quieter. They were waiting at the airport. My parents, older, grayer. Mom was crying. Dad stood stiff like he was afraid to breathe. I stood there with Noah and the kids and realized I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't a daughter looking for approval. I was a grown woman, with a life I built myself. That first evening, we didn't say much. We sat around the table, eating, asking neutral questions. Everyone was tense, but not hostile. Mom touched my hand a couple of times. I didn't pull away, but I didn't hold hers either. I didn't feel anger, just caution. Like I'd returned to a house that used to be mine. But now I couldn't quite remember where the spoons were kept. Each day in that house became both easier and heavier. Easier, because no one was arguing and things on the surface seemed calm. The kids played, conversations stayed neutral, and everyone was polite. But heavier, because I could feel it coming. That moment where someone would try to dig into what I wasn't ready to give. It finally came. One evening, after the kids were in bed, my mom asked me to sit with her on the porch. It was quiet outside. Warm air, distant voices, the sound of night. Then she brought them up, Cassie and Trevor, said maybe it was time I spoke to them. That enough years had passed. That I was grown now. That it was time to close it. I listened, already feeling my shoulders tense. I had known she'd say this. I didn't fight. I didn't raise my voice. I simply said I had no desire to let those people back into my life. I didn't need that. Not now. Not ever. But even that calm refusal seemed to frustrate her more than any argument could have. Her tone changed. There was disappointment in it. She said I'd been angry for too long, that maybe I didn't even remember what I was so upset about anymore. As if time had erased the betrayal, as if forgetting was easier than acknowledging what they'd done. I didn't reply. I got up and went inside. I didn't need to defend my memory. I knew exactly what happened. I left because when everything broke, no one stood with me. They protected the image of family, not the person in pain. I didn't want to revisit it. I didn't want to forgive it. I just wanted to move forward without dragging them behind me. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, we all acted as if nothing had happened. I stayed quiet. Not to keep peace, but because there was nothing left to say. We were leaving the next day. I packed our bags slowly, one eye on the kids, the other on the clock. I thought that was it. That we'd say goodbye, and I'd go back to my real life with some closure, however incomplete. Then, a few hours before our flight, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered without thinking. A woman's voice. Calm but firm. Trevor's mother. She didn't waste time. Said she knew I was in town. That my presence was causing tension. That I needed to meet with Trevor and Cassie. That it was time to settle things. End the silence. I didn't respond. I hung up. My hands were shaking. Not out of fear, but rage. The kind that comes from being pushed one too many times. I hadn't told her I was here. I hadn't given her my number. Only one person had it. My mother. I went to her. No shouting, no drama, I just asked. She didn't deny it. She said she wanted things to heal. That she thought if we just talked, everything would calm down. That she was trying to bring the family back together. That's when it hit me. We weren't on the same side. For her, peace was worth any price. Even if that price was me. I didn't argue. I just walked out of the room and booked a cab. We left earlier than planned. At the airport, everything was quiet. The kids were dozing in their strollers. Noah held my hand. I stared out the window and felt something strange. Peace. This wasn't an escape. It wasn't a flight. This time, I wasn't running away. I was choosing myself. After we returned home, I felt both relieved and hollow. We were back in our apartment. The kids were loud again. Noah was sorting through mail. But inside, I was silent. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of silence that lingers after a door slams shut for good. It took a few days before my mom started calling. At first, cautiously, then persistently. Messages came morning and night. Some were desperate, others accusing. She said I broke her heart, that I was taking her grandchildren away, that I was selfish, that family means forgiveness. I didn't respond. Not once. Noah suggested blocking her number, but I was scared. Not of her, of the guilt, of that creeping feeling I knew so well. The kind that wore a kind voice but pushed with force. Then she started messaging Noah, accusing him of stealing her daughter, even though she barely knew him. That was the breaking point. I called my dad. We hadn't spoken in almost 2 years, but I didn't know who else to turn to. He picked up right away. His voice was calm, but I could tell he was worn out. Emotionally tired, like something inside him had been cracking for a long time, and now it was finally breaking. I told him everything, about the visit, about the call from Trevor's mom, about how mom had given out my number, about how she'd chosen them again. He didn't say much, just listened, then said he understood, that maybe things had reached the point of no return. A few weeks later, I learned he had filed for divorce, after 40 years of marriage. Not just because of me, but because everything that had been building up had finally become impossible to ignore. We didn't go into detail, but I felt something strange. Relief. Like I wasn't the only one who had finally stopped pretending. We started talking more after that. Our relationship wasn't warm or sentimental, but it was honest. Director, no more pretending. He apologized, not for my mom, but for himself. For being silent, for knowing and doing nothing. I didn't cry. I just said, I know, because I did. Mom didn't stop. She contacted other relatives, sent messages on different platforms, even popped up and suggested friends on social media. I changed my number, deleted old accounts, stopped looking at anything that might drag me back. Then a letter came, from Cassie. Not directly, from my brother-in-law. Trevor's brother. Apparently, Cassie and Trevor weren't together anymore. She gave him the letter to pass on. Plain envelope, my name written neatly. I didn't open it. I placed it in a drawer and left it there. Sometimes I thought about it. Wondered what she could possibly want after all these years. But every time I remembered holding her hand at the ultrasound, choosing her daughter's name with her. And I couldn't do it. Some things time doesn't fix. By then, I was back in therapy. Noah and I agreed that if I ever wanted to read the letter, I'd do it with my therapist. I'm still not ready. Maybe I never will be. There's a strange mix of irony and sadness in all of it. My mom had tried so hard to hold the family together. She didn't notice she'd pushed everyone away. According to my dad, none of her 5 kids talk to her anymore. None of her grandchildren know her. She's sick, anxious, losing friends. I don't celebrate that. But I don't pity her either. I tried to be there. Years ago, even recently. And every time she chose someone else. Now, sitting in my own living room, I realized something. I'd finally stepped out of the loop. Not because someone gave me permission, but because I cut the rope myself. And that kind of freedom, no one can take from me.